And here we've come to take shelter of Srila Haridas Thakur. Krishna himself says, Madbhakta Puja Vyadika, that the best means of worshipping me, the first class means of worshipping me, is to worship my bhaktas. Madbhakta Puja Vyadika, Krishna's own words. And Srila Haridas Thakur is emblematic of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's approach to spreading the philosophy of the Bhagavad all over the world. In the Rig Veda, oldest book in the world, there's a story of Vritrasura fighting with Indra. And Indra is the hero. He's part of the establishment. And Vritrasura is an outsider. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that Indra's the outsider. And Vritrasura, although he's supposedly a demon and a famous one, known since the time of the Rig Veda, the Bhagavatam says not so fast. You'll see that Vritrasura is the hero of the story because he's a pure devotee. As we know from reading Bhagavatam, he was Chitraketu, cursed by Parvati. He was already a pure devotee, but then he took another birth. For, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, devotees sometimes take various births on their way for complete perfection in the spiritual world. Also in the Bhagavad, we find that although it's an eternal principle that the disciple follows the guru, we find that Bali Maharaj rejects his guru because his guru was against Vishnu. And we find in the idea of the culture that the husband becomes the protector and leader of the wife. The Bhagavad turns it on its head in the story of the wives of the Brahmanas. When the cowherd boys were walking with Krishna, they said, "We're hungry." Krishna said, "You can beg from the Brahmanas. They're about to perform a sacrifice and the timing is right that you can ask them for something." He said, "Don't ask in my name, ask in Balaram's name," because he's a Kshatriya. Ostensibly, Krishna's a Vaishya. He knew they were very caste conscious, not Krishna conscious. But to what extent that the cowherd boys went, offered obeisances, said, "O earthly gods, Krishna and Balaram are nearby, and we'd like to bring them some food." We're begging on their behalf. And the Brahmanas ignored them. Just like yesterday, there were 3 gentlemen, and we were trying to corner them, and they pretended that we didn't exist at the bus station. And then you have to look down and see, I wonder if I do exist. Ignorance is very potent in that it immediately puts a pall of darkness. And these Brahmanas ignored Krishna's representatives. So what's the use of being a Brahmana, says the Bhagavatam. So then he sent them to the wives of the Brahmanas, and they offered obeisances. Said, "Our dear mothers, Krishna and Balaram are in the forest." And before they could finish the sentence, they intuited what they were asking, and they took all the food and hurried off to the forest out of spontaneous attraction for Krishna. They had been pining for him even though they hadn't met him, because they heard about him again and again from pure devotees in the marketplace. So Bhagavatam again and again goes to the essence of what's most important. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is synonymous with the Bhagavatam. He came to teach Bhagavat philosophy to the world. And the Bhagavatam begins by saying, Dharma projita kaitavo traparamo nirmatsaranam satam. That it completely rejects any religious principles that are materially motivated and propounds the highest truth, which is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. And throughout the Bhagavatam we find also that Shukadeva Goswami points out that anyone who sincerely tries to serve Krishna becomes empowered to do so, despite their birth or their position in society. Even Prahlad Maharaj had wondered when Nrsingadev appeared at how he would be pushed forward after the demigods and even Brahma tried to pacify Lord Nrsingadev. And Lord Nrsingadev wasn't pacified. So they pushed forward a 5-year-old boy and they said, you try. Prabhupada said it's like there's a ferocious lion and you push a 5-year-old boy into the cage. Say, please calm him down. And Prahlad Maharaj then marveled at how the demigods who knew perfect Sanskrit and had spoken in perfect language, Ramadaya Suraganamunayota Siddha Satvai Katana Katayo Vachasam Bravahe Naraditum Puruganaranapi Pipru Kim Toshnamarhati Same Hara Ugrajate Manyedana Bijana Rupa Tapasutau Just Teja Prabhava Palabaush Bhuti Yoga Naradanaihi Bhavanti Parasya Punkto Bhaktyatutosha Bhagavan Gajayutapaya. He said that Brahma and all his minions had offered prayers there in the mode of goodness. He said, who am I? I have demoniac blood running through me. And then he said, people have so many qualities that they may have wealth or beauty or bodily strength, intelligence. But he said, Manye Dana Bijanarupa. I don't think those are what you like, Krishna. It's not what you're after. It's not what attracts you. After all, Aishvaryasya Samagrasya Viryasya. Krishna has all the opulences. And anybody who has some opulence, it's coming from Krishna. Just a little spark of his splendor, he said. Even Mahavishnu and Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Shirdakshay Vishnu, they're pretty powerful personalities. And that's just a tiny spark of my opulence. So Krishna's not impressed by that. But then, Bhaktyatu Tosha Bhagavan Gajayutapaya, he says, does Prahlad, but Gajendra, even though he was an elephant, and Prabhupada said he might have been a big fatty animal, but because he had devotion to Krishna, even in the emergency situation, came out and he prayed to the Lord. He said that satisfied the Lord. Bhaktyatu Tosha, because he had some bhakti. Bhaktyatu Tosha, Bhagavan Gajayutapaya, the king of the elephants, satisfied the Lord, even though everybody else couldn't. He remembered Gajendra. And then he said, Tasmat, therefore, Aham Vigata Viklaka Ishvarasya, Sarvatmana Mahikranami Yata Manisham, Nicho Jaya Guna Visarga Manu Pravishta, Puyeta Yena Hipuman Anuvarnitena. Therefore, he said, Tasmat, therefore, anyone who sincerely tries to serve the Lord, Tasmadaham Vigata Viklaka Ishvaras, just with sincere intent tries to pray to the Lord and do some service, sincerely tries, that person will be accepted by the Lord and they'll become purified by the endeavor. So the rules and regulations of Varnashrama, Dharma Swanistita Pumsam Vishvakshena Katasuya Notpadiyad Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. That absolutely positively, without question, if any of the rules and regulations of Varnashram don't lead to an increased attraction for devotional service, especially hearing about the Lord. They are absolutely, positively, what's another? Completely useless. They're shrama. Shrama means the stuff you spit out because it's already chewed, it's already useless, it doesn't do any good to anybody. So that was the culture around Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Wherever he saw the spark of pure devotional service, he would fan that spark. And he would elevate anyone who had that sincere intention to come to a position of authority in the Sankirtan movement. He started a movement. He was, we heard yesterday that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda, they opened a marketplace. Marketing, it requires quantitative and qualitative reasoning and procedures. Does it not? And Mahaprabhu was interested in organizing. In fact, we know at Rath Yatra he organized by putting in place the dancers. Who would dance? You're a dancer, you're a dancer, you're a dancer. You're definitely a dancer. And then he would put in the singers. He would have the Madunga players, everything arranged. Sankirtan movement was not willy-nilly. And Mahaprabhu was very much aware of who was sincere. In fact, at the house of Haridas Thakur, during the Mahaprakash ceremony, when devotees were clamoring to be close to the Lord, there was a servant in the house of Haridas Thakur who was in the background. Nobody noticed her because she was just serving everybody, and like salt, you don't notice it until it's gone. And he said, "Who is that back there?" And he noted her service. Srila said, "Oh, she's one of our trusted servants in our household. Her name is Duki." And Mahaprabhu said, "From today on, her name will be Sukhi." Duki means unhappy. Sukhi means happy. And so Mahaprabhu was always looking for any living being, whether they were a tiger or an elephant, a deer, a complete outcast. He would run into people and he would find the highest quality in them. For instance, when he was coming from Vrindavan and in ecstasy he fainted, and his followers, as usual, were slightly at a loss what to do with Mahaprabhu. It was not so easy, as even when he went to Vrindavan, he was traveling, oftentimes whenever he'd see a body of water, he'd think Jamuna and jump in. And they were afraid he was going to drown. It was very hard to manage Mahaprabhu, and plus he would go in ecstasy and then faint. And it's hard to travel when your leader is fainting all the time. So they were around Mahaprabhu, wondering how long he would be in ecstasy, should they revive him, because oftentimes when they did revive him, he was annoyed. But during that time, some Pathan soldiers from the Muslim community came along patrolling on horses, and they stopped and accused all the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of drugging him. Otherwise, why would he be like that? And you're probably stealing from him. And as they were engaged in back and forth dialogue, convincing him, one of the devotees said, "Actually, we have soldiers over that hill with cannons, and if you don't leave us alone, I'm going to call them." Around that time, Mahaprabhu came back and said, "Haribo!" And yeah, like that. And then he's talked to the Muslim soldiers, and they were so enamored of his effulgence and the way that he presented so gently but convincingly, even using their own scriptures, that several of them, Bajuli Khan and others, wanted to be a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They were converted right there. And he initiated them right on the hillside. Prabhupada writes, this is the prerogative of those in the Sankirtan movement to go here, there, and everywhere without discrimination, and find those who have a spark of interest and sincere desire, and then bring them into the fold of the Sankirtan movement. So here in Jagannath Puri, the chief of the devotees, Haridas Thakur, in general society, which was concerned with caste, creed, rules, and regulations, Haridas Thakur was considered, not well considered within the Hindu culture. And even with Advaita Acharya, back in Navadvip, when performing a Shraddha ceremony, at the end you're supposed to offer the prasad to the most qualified Vaishnava that's available. And Advaita Acharya would take that Shraddha Patra and he would give it to Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur said, this isn't going to look good on Facebook, social media. They're going to put out criticism that why are you giving it to a Muslim-bodied person? And Advaita Acharya said what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what the Bhagavatam says. Kirata hunandra pulinda pulklasha abhirashumba yavanakasadaya yeneja papa yadapashraya shraya shudyanti tasmai pravavishnave namaha. The only qualification is that one is surrendered to the Lord, and by the power of the Lord's mercy, that person becomes an exalted soul. Not by some birth or social position. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the final pastimes of Haridas Thakur, had come to see him as he did regularly. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what is the news? Haridas Thakur said, the news is that I'm having a hard time finishing my rounds. After all, he was chanting 182 rounds? 192. That's a few more than 16. But he's chanting it every day. And he had become infirm. He was getting old, and he said that the news is I can't finish my rounds. And Mahaprabhu said, that is all right. You don't have anything to prove. You can reduce the number of rounds. And then Haridas Thakur's request was, if you'll please fulfill my desire, I wish to leave this world before you do. I cannot bear the idea of watching your disappearance pastime. I wouldn't be able to survive. So if you would kindly allow me to leave before you, that is the news. And Mahaprabhu had informed all the devotees and had come back to meet Haridas Thakur. And as we know from the Bhagavatam, the great souls like Bhishma Dev, Bhishma, although impaled by multiple arrows, he had the strength by benediction and by his own power of his vows and his powerful devotional service. He didn't have to leave until he decided he wanted to leave his body. And Haridas Thakur had decided it was time for him to leave. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came back. Haridas Thakur placed his lotus feet on his chest, and beholding the beautiful lotus-like face of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chanting his holy names, he left his transcendental form. And I say transcendental form because our Vaishnava acharyas make much of this. Aprarada palam papam kutam bijam palon mukam kramenaiva praliyante Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. The Vishnu Purana says, and there are many other corroborating Shastric statements about how when one is a pure devotee and uses and is chanting the holy names of the Lord, engaged in the Lord's service, the person is freed from all different stages of karma. That's what's being named in this verse of Vishnu Purana. Aprarabdha means that's karma that hasn't manifested yet. If you think you're in the clear, no, I'm not talking to you. If somebody thinks they're in the clear, just wait till the karma fructifies later. It'll come. You can't escape it. Aprarabdha palam papam. There's stages from subtle and then developing, then sprouting, then offering some flower, then the fruit of the karma comes out. The fruit of the karma, we know from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, one gives up this present body, the next life, you're given a physical frame that is commensurate with the aggregate of your desires from the last life, and your karma, the force of your own consciousness, begs the material nature to accommodate you, and then you're accommodated. But for a completely pure devotee, and this is confirmed by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Madhurya Kadambini, that even the prarabdha, the physical body, so-called material body of a devotee, is also transcendental. And it's not a karmic body. In fact, this comes up in the conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sanatana Goswami, and Haridas Thakur earlier, because of Sanatana's diseased body. And Mahaprabhu we talked about this, repeatedly embracing him. And Sanatana was thinking, I better commit suicide than make these offenses because of the state of my body. What to speak, I mean, he felt useless. And Mahaprabhu, being omniscient, had understood his mind, and then the conversation ensued about how he said, you don't have first of all, your body doesn't belong to you anymore. You gave it to me. It's a donation. You can't take it back. I plan to use your body to spread Krishna consciousness. Through you, he said, I'm going to establish the exact principles of Vaishnavism. And Sanatana Goswami wrote the Hari Bhakti Vilas, or he compiled it. And of course, he gave us the Briya Bhagavatamrita. And Prabhupada says everyone who wants to know about the details of being a Vaishnava, you have to read that book. And what to speak of establishing the lost places of pilgrimage, the lost places of Krishna's Leela in Vrindavan and so forth. So there he says, just Chaitanya Maharaj, Diksha Kali Bhakta Kari Atma Samarpan, She Kali Krishna Tari Tari Atma Sam. He said when somebody surrenders to Krishna, especially he mentions here Diksha, Divyam Jnanam Yito Dadyat Kuryat Papa Sasankshayam, Tasmat Diksheti Saprokta, Deshikais Tatvakovidai, means when you accept Diksha, then your previous karmas are all smashed because of that connection, which is a connection to Krishna through the Guru. And so he said, when you've surrendered, you don't have a physical body anymore. It may not be a siddha deha, but it's a sadhaka deha. And that's different from a regular material body that's just hanging around from the last life. It's been transcendentalized and based on the principle of Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmanohutam Tenaiva Brahmagantavya Brahmakarma, that anything you use in Krishna's service becomes transcendentalized. So he said, your body isn't a material body anymore. And then what happens to the body if it's no longer, it's prarabdha, it's the full fruit of your previous karma. So what happens to it if all your karma is gone? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, well, the Lord maintains the body personally. so that the devotee, the pure devotee, can go on teaching Krishna consciousness to other people, but it's not a material body. And this comes out in the pastime of Sri Haridas Thakur, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. And in the ceremony, Mahaprabhu personally picked up the body, we call it the transcendental body of Srila Haridas Thakur, and he danced with it right here. And he personally, with his own transcendental divine lotus hands, placed the beautiful body of Haridas Thakur in Samadhi, and asked the devotees to help fill in the Samadhi. And then they held a festival to celebrate the transcendental service and life of Srila Haridas Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and all the pure devotees in that Guru Gana maintained these principles and extended them to the world. And one has to know the essence of spiritual practice so one doesn't make errors and revert to following rules and regulations, niyamagraha, just for the sake of following them without knowing their purpose. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, for instance, had received instructions from his guru. He said, never go to Calcutta. And he said the other instruction was, don't take any disciples. Did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta go to Calcutta? Did he ever take disciples? No, he didn't. He followed the order of his guru. As he said later, these are not my disciples. These were sent by my spiritual master so I could serve them and help spread Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. He said, I don't consider they're my disciples. He said, did I go to Calcutta? I never went to Calcutta. Because KTTVG, when you keep the transcendental vibration going and everything that you're touching, whatever property, wherever you step, your only concern is, how will I use this in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Somebody came and said, I'll build you a temple. I'll give you $1 billion and donate it for you, and I'll do all the work. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur arranged for that to be done. But he never stepped foot in Calcutta. And this is somewhat similar to the ideas we find in Shastra, where we hear statements, Anyadev, Sri Upanishad. What is it? No. What? Tadejati, tadnaijati, tadure, tadvantike, tarantarasya sarvasya, turu sarvasya sivaya. Lord's far away, is very near as well. He's within everything, and yet he's outside of everything. And we hear statements like that, we can understand what the Upanishads are saying. We can understand through the Bhagavat and through the Bhagavat teachers that it means the Lord has no material form. Doesn't mean he doesn't have any form. So in a similar way, when everything's used in Krishna service, it becomes transcendentalized. And the great advanced devotees are those who are most faithfully engaged in the service of the Guru Parampara. And I'll read you one purport, unless you demand to hear many more, in which case we can sit here all day and all oblige. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 2nd chapter. Who's speaking? The demigods. Who are they speaking to? For 20 points. Krishna in the womb. Isn't that nice? They all gathered around because they knew Krishna was going to appear, because he told them he was going to appear, and then they also had insider information, so they came there. This is one of the prayers. Is this the right one? Huh? It's right after Swayambhu Jakshaki Lasat Vadami. Yes, thank you. This verse, for those who are keeping score at home, is 10:2:31. Don't freak out when you hear this verse. It's too nice. You might go nuts. Okay, O Lord, who resemble the shining sun, you are always ready to fulfill the desire of your devotee. And therefore you are known as a desire tree, Vanchakalpataru. When acharyas completely take shelter under your lotus feet in order to cross the fierce ocean of nescience, they leave behind on earth the method by which they cross, and because you are very merciful to your other devotees, you accept this method to help them. Here's Prabhupada's purport. Yes? I'm sorry? I'm going to read the translation again by popular demand. O Lord, who resemble the shining sun, you are always ready to fulfill the desire of your devotee, and therefore you are known as a desire tree, Vanchakalpataru. When acharyas completely take shelter under your lotus feet in order to cross the fierce ocean of nescience, they leave behind on earth the method by which they cross, and because you are very merciful to your other devotees, you accept this method to help them. Okay? Purport. Everybody ready? This requires ugrashrava, fierce hearing. Ready? Be fierce. This statement reveals how the merciful acharyas and the merciful Supreme Personality of Godhead together help the serious devotee who wants to return home back to Godhead. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his teachings to Rupa Goswami said, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. One can achieve the seed of Bhakti Lata, devotional service, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna. The duty of the Guru is to find the means, according to the time, the circumstance, and the candidate by which one can be induced to render devotional service. Mark that word, induced. And look it up. Which Krishna accepts from a candidate who wants to be successful in going back home, back to Godhead. Worth repeating. Would you like to hear the sentence again? Yes. Okay, 50% said yes, the other 50% cover your ears. It says the duty of the Guru is to find the means according to the time, the circumstances, and the candidate by which one can be induced to render devotional service, which Krishna accepts from a candidate who wants to be successful in going back home, back to Godhead. After wandering throughout the universe, a fortunate person within this material world seeks shelter of such a guru or acharya who trains the devotee in the suitable ways to render service according to the circumstances, so that the Supreme Personality of Godhead will accept the service. This makes it easier for the candidate to reach the ultimate destination. The acharya's duty, therefore, is to find the means by which devotees may render service according to references from Shastra. Rupa Goswami, for example, in order to help subsequent devotees, published such devotional books as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Thus, it is the duty of the acharya to publish books that will help future candidates take up the method of service and become eligible to return home back to Godhead by the mercy of the Lord. In our Krishna consciousness movement, this same path is being prescribed and followed. Thus, the devotees have been advised to refrain from 4 sinful activities: illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling, and to chant 16 rounds a day. These are bona fide instructions, because in the Western countries, constant chanting is not possible. One should not artificially imitate Haridas Thakur, but should follow this method. Krishna will accept a devotee who strictly follows the regulative principles and the method prescribed in the various books and literatures. published by the authorities. The acharya gives the suitable method for crossing the ocean of nescience by accepting the boat of the Lord's lotus feet. And if this method is strictly followed, the followers will ultimately reach the destination by the grace of the Lord. This method is called acharya sampradaya. It is therefore said, sampradaya vihina ye mantraste nishpala mata. The acharya sampradaya is strictly bona fide. Therefore, one must accept the acharya sampradaya. Otherwise, one's endeavor will be futile. Srila Narottam Das Thakur therefore sings, Tandera charana sebe bhakta sanivas, janame hoy e abhilash. One must worship the lotus feet of the acharya and live within the society of devotees. Then one's endeavor to cross over nescience will surely be successful. So we worship the acharyas, acharya upasanam, and therefore we come to see Haridas Thakur and remember how he was posted personally by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and how the Sankirtan movement goes on by adhering to the examples of these great souls who cannot be imitated, but they can be followed. Anupashyati, one must see the path through their eyes, how they perform devotional service, and we can be successful. So we pray to Srila Haridas Thakur that we may have his acumen for following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and strictly following the process. As we heard the other day, he not only followed strictly, but he also preached. And those are the two verifiable symptoms that Prabhupada mentions in his purport to the verse number 5, Upadeshamrita. Krishneti yasya, no. Yeah. Huh? No. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chet pranati bishta bhajantamisham shushushaya bhajana vignamananyamanya nindari shunya tridamipsita sangalagya. There he talks about the different levels of devotees. Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttam. So he says the Uttama Adhikari preaches, and the Uttama Adhikari follows the process. Otherwise, if you go by a standard, are you dancing with Krishna at night? You may be hard put to verify that. But if you go by the standard Prabhupada set, it's the person strictly following. You can observe the sadhana, and you can also see as the person chanting. And that's what Sanatana Goswami said about Srila Haridas Thakur. He said, you chant, definitely chant your rounds. And you also preach. And he said, therefore you're the greatest devotee in the world, because you do these two things. Of course, he did them better than anybody. And Prabhupada, in his purport of that verse, says those are the empowering factors for anyone to be a leader in this spiritual movement, to follow in the footsteps, not imitate, but to follow strictly the process of Haridas Thakur. Then one becomes empowered to spread the Sankirtan movement. Now we'll take some time for a few reflections or questions to expand the conversation. By the way, the word induce means to lead by persuasions or other influences. From Latin inducere, lead into, bring into, introduce, conduct, persuade. And ducere comes from the word ducere, to lead, to bring about by leadership, and to infer by reasoning. Comments, reflections. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about chanting 16 rounds, and you mentioned that Haridas Thakur chanted 192 rounds. I believe those rounds are split up in 3 rounds in the mind, rounds chanted, and rounds in Sankirtan. I've heard we do chanting with our tongues, but in this age, is it possible to do rounds in the mind, or what's the recommendation on sound level of chanting?
Well, anything's possible, but the idea of acharya upasana is to find out what the most recent acharya has prescribed. And Prabhupada didn't introduce chanting in the mind so much at all. In fact, he said you should use your tongue and lips. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. You should chant like Vishnu Gada. If you stand near him, you can hear Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Be a stita deer Muni. Munis speculate, what about this, what about that, how about that era, how about this one, how we put them all together, how about we mix them, turn them on their head, get 32 more flavors out of this one and that one. I mean, you can try that, but the Stita Deer Muni is one who says, okay, Occam's razor, the simplest answer is the best. Just follow what the previous acharya said and don't make a grandiose effort to adjust all kinds of things. And if you do find something that works for you, then just work it and don't make a movement out of it. Just, go somewhere and make sure it's effective. All right?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, you're talking about how a devotee doesn't have, he doesn't have to be in a super high position, or you mentioned the verse you mentioned the verse Manye Dana Vitin Rupa Dapausha. You don't have to have these many qualities to be a good devotee. But my question was, if you're in a leadership position and your job is to basically delegate services to other devotees, you sort of have to judge these devotees to, put them in services to make it more efficient. So how do you kind of balance?
Well, we are a spiritual corporation, but the way Prabhupada empowered people was when he saw a spark, he fanned it. And as an example, when Prabhupada wanted 52 color plates for his Krishna book, circa 1969, he brought together artists. And some of them were fledgling artists. And then the facilities were in a basement in Boston that was dark and dank. And there were some canvases, there were some paints and brushes. And some of the devotees came to Prabhupada and they said, we don't really know Krishna that well. And also, some of them said, and it was very true, for most of them, he said, we're not very good artists. And Prabhupada didn't say, well, let's hire some other people or something. He said, stay in front of the canvas and pray. And look what came out. And of course, he consulted because the artists would go to him regularly, and that's one of the reasons it took so long to publish books. And in fact, when the Chaitanya Charitamrita Marathon started, one of the concessions that the leaders of the BBT asked for was to, can we expedite the painting process, and instead of having paintings, you'll notice there's a lot of photographs. Bhargava took those. Of course, he had that time, there was no digital stuff. He had to travel to India and take the photographs. The question at hand, how to empower people. When you see some enthusiasm and somebody wants to do something, you bring them in to help. And of course, there can be some guidelines that if they can't do it very well, somebody can train them, or you can humbly suggest they do something else. But Prabhupada's way of engaging people was that he said, you don't need to learn anything extra. And it was based on Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddha Yogam Tam Yenamam Upayantite, that if you're sincere and you try, Krishna will give you the intelligence how to do it. So through apprenticeship, through guidance, and through the sincere endeavors, then one can be empowered. And so if you don't see all of the qualities they need, they'll get them. And that's one of the ways they do get them, is by being engaged in service, because your seva will save you. Hare Krishna. Yes?
Gurudev, this Skanda Puran words which we were reciting, and this had Tvai Jata Pradhanam Tvameva Sharanam Prabhu. So the second line, you alone are the only shelter for those who have offended you. So is it Danya, or is it something which is related to Haridas Thakur's mood?
Could you hear what he's saying? It's from verses we read earlier in a set of prayers that Bhaktivinoda Thakur put together that are in our Padati, right?
Yes, it's the
and it says
Panchaka.
It's a
open your heart to Radha and
prayer
Krishna.
of lamenting one's lowly position and asking for engagement in service. And it says, my Lord, you're the only shelter for those who have offended you. And that's what your question's about. And the word offended, he's saying it seems a bit...
Is it an expression of just feeling very low about, even if you have qualities but you don't want to admit, or you feel that there's so much to do?
Well, it's definitely an expression of humility, but the idea is, as given by Krishna himself in the Bhagavatam 11th canto, he says, Supada mulam bhajata priyasya taktanya. I'm sorry. Swapada mulam bhajata priyasya vikarma yachchot patitam katachit dunoti sarvam hridisani vishtaha. And that is that, did I miss a line? Supada mulam bhajata priyasya taktanya bhavasa hare priyeshaha vikarma yachchot patitam katanchit dunoti sarvam hridisani vishtaha. This is the prescription for those who have made an offense. If you slip and do something inappropriate and make an offense, then, as I specifically said, vikarma yachchot patitam katanchit, which means somehow or other you go into vikarma, you do something bad. Then the prescription is, the reformation takes place by sincerely going on with your service. Because Sanivishta, Krishna's there within your heart, and he'll rectify.